Yo, yo.
What's up, man?
Hey, dude, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
All right.
Ready to get going?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sweet. So, just describe a little bit about yourself. Maybe let's go back into your past a little bit. But let me ask you, what are you doing nowadays with COVID stuff? Let me go ahead and just ask you that.
um, anything that keeps the sanity of myself and my family, yeah, I've been doing a couple different things. I've done a little bit of work, mostly just kind of going over my marketing initiatives for this year, for website updates and for promos. And I've also been going through my archive of family photos that's just incredibly behind. So I'm trying to stay current with that because it's my best chance now of having the time to go back and get caught up, or else, it's just really hard during sort of normal times when I have just an influx of work. So spending some extra time with my kids, trying to give my wife a break from being with the kids all the time. So yeah, just trying to take it day by day.
That's good to hear. Yeah. I've been seeing some of your family stuff on social, and I really like seeing some like people like yourself who are, so talented, away from home, that they bring those talents at home and like capture those moments with their family. It's really cool to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always taken a lot of pictures of my family, my kids especially, just because I'm sort of the only one in the family that has that skill. And, like I know that I really enjoyed as a kid looking at old family photos. And, I've sort of decided that if I didn't take them, then nobody was going to take them. So yeah, so I photograph my kids a lot. I don't post a lot of photos of my kids online. Just because it's like, who wants to see somebody's kids all the time? But yeah, I just feel that's more just for our family. But I do, post them occasionally, and I felt like it was appropriate during this time to post a few more maybe than normal, just because that's like everyone's new reality is like what they're doing at home and what they're experiencing with their kids. So
Mm-hmm.
I try to mix it in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. It's really inspiring to see that kind of stuff because it helps people like myself who kind of try to put the camera away a little bit more. I know, like when work was a little bit more active, I tried to keep the camera off a little bit because I just felt like I wanted to put it down. I felt like I was at work if I had it in my hands. Have you felt that way before, where you just needed to put the camera down?
All the time, all the time. Yeah, I mean, there are definitely times and certain milestones with like my family that like I know I'm going to shoot. It's going to be great. I'm going to take more of a photographer's approach to it. And then there's other times where I'm just like, you know what? I just want to experience this moment and be there and not be like, the dad with like the video camera and the still camera. Like, my youngest son turned 4 in April this month. And, it was like from the time he got up, it was like I had video and stills and I was like just doing everything. And there's other times where I'm just like, all right, I just need to chill out. If I get anything with my iPhone, great. If I don't do anything at all, like I've gotten a lot of photos like over the last days, weeks, whatever. And then, there's certain times when I don't shoot them seriously, for larger periods of time. And that's cool. I've also decided, aside from when like my oldest, who is 5 now, when he was born, like the first year of his life, like I definitely was pretty heavy handed on documenting that because it was this incredible thing. And not to say that it's not incredible now, but along the way, I sort of decided that it was more important for me to really just experience, being with my family as a priority. And sometimes that lends itself to making really great images and focusing on composition and all the stuff that I would focus on professionally. But then there's other times when I'm just like, okay, if I get a snapshot to remember this is great, I'm not going to sit there and try to make every image perfect because it just takes away from the moment. So you balance that out. But I find myself, when I'm photographing my kids, to not take it as seriously as I do my professional work.
do you find yourself, and we'll jump back to kind of the start of your career, but do you find yourself kind of having those moments in your career where you're just trying to not take it so seriously? That way you feel like you get something different. Don't you feel like you would get something different?
Maybe, but yeah, I can't turn off the switch for professional content. Yeah, I'm definitely like the switch is on 100%, 110% whenever I'm working it, whether it's, you know, a commissioned assignment or even if it's just a personal assignment that I'm giving myself to go out and do, like, I take it very seriously. So I don't, it's pretty uncommon that I go out and just sort of half-ass something.
Cool.
Which, you know, it's like, you think you get tired of it, but that's just, you know, I think that's just how I am internally, and I'm always trying to be the best that I can. So any opportunity that I have to do that, you know, I take advantage of it. I think, you know, even if there's an assignment, maybe it's not the most glamorous thing in the world or the most important, I think you can always take away something from that, even if the pictures from that are not sort of like the best end product. Like the experience, I think, allows you to build for other assignments. So I'm always trying to just get better at what I do.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. So let's jump back to the beginning. Explain or tell a little bit about yourself and where you got started.
Back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland. Growing up, I was always sort of like the artsy kid. Whether it be drawing or painting or whatever, you know, always excelled at that. So middle school, high school was into that kind of stuff, nothing specific. In high school was my first exposure to photography. I had, you know, I started doing shooting film for a class and some small manipulations when Photoshop sort of was just kind of, you know, getting popular. Still didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do as a, you know, with a career. So when I went to college, I kind of had the idea that I would do graphic design as a major. You know, I knew I wasn't going to be a fine artist. Like, you know, I've been a perfectionist for as long as I can remember. So like, I always knew like drawing or painting that like, I knew that I couldn't do it well enough to really be good at it.
Yeah.
Compared to like other, you know, other peers that I saw were amazing. So, you know, graphic design was a way that I could mix sort of fine arts and something that I thought was maybe like more business oriented and more practical, that I could go work for a graphic design firm. I wasn't going to be like an artist selling paintings on the street corner. So I started that program. I didn't get into that program. I went to Penn State. It was a very competitive major at the time, and I wasn't accepted. And I was like, well, what the hell do I do now? I was like, you know, I didn't understand. I thought I was doing really well. And I applied twice actually, and still didn't get in. So I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Like, obviously, like I had to do something art related. I had taken not a lot, but some photography classes as, you know, prerequisites and electives. And it was sort of like the next thing was like, hey, well, I'm kind of excelling at this and I enjoy it. I don't know what it means to be a photographer as a career, but I sort of switched gears and pursued that. It wasn't a traditional photography major. It was what's called integrative arts, which kind of allowed me to pick and choose certain classes that, you know, that I wanted to take, and I didn't have to take the sort of traditional route with the traditional, you know, prerequisites. So I took a lot of the same classes as a photography major would, but not all the same. And it got me out of some other classes that I just hated and couldn't get through. So, you know, I didn't have any sort of like a photography history education, like was not turned on to any, you know, world-renowned photographers. I was very like sheltered when it came to that. And I didn't really know what it meant to be a professional photographer. I was like, well, I'll just go work for a photography company. Like, you know, and I graduated in about 2004. So like, I had no idea what that meant. You know, I just knew I didn't think I was going to be self-employed, and I just thought I would just go take pictures for somebody. So graduated college with just the worst portfolio you could ever imagine. It was just so bad. Like I look at.
What were you shooting?
Man, I was shooting like just fine art stuff. You know, I was like, you know, like my pièce de résistance was like I had spent like 3 days like walking around a junkyard near where I went to school and like just like still lives of like spider webs and rust and you know, like at the time I was like, this is great. It was like, you know, I wasn't photographing people. I really wasn't I don't know if like I've always been a people person, but I wasn't into like making portraits. I played rugby, so like I lived in the rugby house with a bunch of jocks, and like not people like you typically like inspired to photograph like just for making art. Like
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of an outcast there. So like um, yeah. So I pursued that major. When I got out of school, I didn't really know what I was going to do. A couple weeks after I graduated, I answered an ad for like a studio photographer. And it ended up, I showed up at this place, had my portfolio. I was like just feeling so great about walking through the door, showing my stuff. And it was like one of those like school portrait, youth sports portrait deals. And they didn't even like ask to look at my portfolio. And they were like, yeah, whoever's here is hired. We need seasonal help. And so it's like, well, this isn't exactly sort of like plan A that I had mapped out for myself. But I started doing it. I was like, it's 2 weeks out of school. I got a paycheck and, maybe learn some stuff. So sort of like the non-traditional route. Like it never dawned on me to like contact local photographers and like ask to assist them, and never did that early on. And some part of me like regrets that, but also part of me is like pretty cool with how things turned out. So I try not to meddle in my past too much. But yeah, so I started shooting school portraits. Like that's how I learned like lighting and really just interacting with people and how to like when you're photographing them, like how to make people smile and just make people feel at ease. And I started shooting like youth action sports. So that's how I got into sports photography. I was shooting like kids playing sports, and I did that for much longer than I thought I was going to. And after a couple years, I was actually shooting a tournament. It's like the Maryland Youth Football Championships at Ravens Stadium. It was like 2006-ish. And I'd been there all day just shooting action photos of kids, and ran into a guy who I was friends with from college. He actually was on the football team, and I played rugby. We had met, and so he was like, yeah, like clearly you're doing photography. I was like, yeah, like what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, I'm the youth marketing coordinator for the Ravens, and I sort of like handle anything that has to do with that aspect of the team. And he's like, we have like a team photographer that shoots the games, but we're looking for other photographers from time to time to shoot events, like youth events. And would you be interested? And I was like, of course, yeah. In my head, I was like, man, I'm so not qualified to do this. He was like, your portfolio, and I was like, sure, I totally have a portfolio ready to go. So I went home, created a portfolio, resume, all that stuff that I didn't have. Because I didn't have like this like best of portfolio that was just going to wow anybody. Like I knew I wasn't going to BS anybody. So he talked to me about shooting youth sports and youth events. So I was like, I don't have, I hadn't even shot professional sports. I hadn't even shot college sports by then. I was just shooting like high school, middle school, that age. So I made a portfolio out of like the images that I'd taken that day. I was like, okay, well, it's Raven Stadium, little kids and little like the Columbia Ravens teams were there. And I was like, okay, I'll just put together what I shot that day, and either he'll, laugh off his chair, or be like, oh, resonates with me. So made some prints, mailed in some prints, and didn't hear anything for a little while. And then I think it was, within a week, he got back to me. He was like, hey man, I've been passing these pictures to everyone around the office, like the director of marketing, and everyone was like, oh, where are these photos coming from? Who's this? And so something stood out to them. I think early on, I always had an interest in pursuing sort of like the behind the scenes, and more emotional moments than just your typical like action.
Like the feature type stuff.
Yeah, features. Totally. Like I was always into that. And that, I think even at that point in my career, which hadn't even started yet, stood out. And so I got some chances. They hired me to do some youth events, and sort of rolled on from there. I started shooting like that year, shot training camp, and basically just focusing on sort of the pageantry of everything, fans, cheerleaders, interaction, stuff like that. And it sort of snowballed from there.
Awesome. Yeah, your Raven stuff, of course, I feel like that stands out quite a bit. Like I can see the approach that you're talking about with this feature, because I kind of want to talk a little bit more about the idea of what a feature is compared to action shots, and how, what I'm trying to say, like why choose the feature type work over the action stuff?
I think there's lots of different reasons. One is, action is, it's really unpredictable. It's, it happens so quickly that, you're lucky that you can get anything, let alone like something that's well composed, that doesn't have a busy background, that is in focus. All the things you look for in action shots. It's incredibly difficult. With I sit through an NFL game sometimes, and it's a wonder that we make any good pictures, just because referees go in front of you, players go in front of you. It's like it's just totally unpredictable. So there's definitely like I think a badge of honor of like being able to get great action shots, but it's less like under my control. Whereas I feel like the feature moments, that is my time to be able to inflect some of my you know my creativity into the moment, where I have more control over like how close and how far I can get and what's my background. And so I feel like that it's easier for me to sort of put myself into that work, try to push the boundaries and be a little bit more creative. It's hard to be creative with action shots. Like sometimes, once in a blue moon, like you sort of just nail it and everything just aligns. But I mean, there's less than a handful of images in my entire career that I'd say sort of align that way. So yeah, I just always, I was a former athlete, and I've always been intrigued about sort of like the passion that athletes have that kind of drive them to do what they do. So like, I think it helps humanize athletes, especially football players, like helmets on, like pads on. You sort of like, you're not even looking at this, the person that is actually underneath all this stuff. So trying to like peel back some of that, mystery and show that, it's like, it's not just a game. It's people, like are really invested their lives, and it's, you experience the joys and sort of the pain, and that's all much more intriguing to me than the action.
And congrats on the honorable. Well, you had second place in the feature category on the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like the last 2 years, I've had two images placed.
Last year was first.
Yeah, first in actually two features. I had first place and then an honorable mention, and then this year I had a second place in feature and an honorable mention in action. So yeah, that was a nice surprise. I mean, it's the only competition that I enter every year typically, and like I never think I'm gonna win. I always think like, well, you're probably tired of seeing like Ravens images. Like,
I'm not tired of seeing them. Like you can keep doing that every year if you want to.
I appreciate that. Like, and I think going back to sort of the difference between action and feature. I just feel like feature is a way for me to connect sports images to people that aren't like crazy sports fans. Like I think, obviously a crazy action photo, like everyone can say, oh, wow, that's impressive. But I think like the more emotional moments and something that, like features, you're able to create stuff that maybe stands out a bit more, is a little bit different. I think that gives, you the opportunity to connect with someone who may be into photography, but may not be into football or whatever sport. And they can connect on an emotional level versus it being a purely sports photo.
Yeah, that's what I'm pretty thankful for when it came to assisting Kevin Liles, because it was seeing him, like he was pretty well known for doing a lot of his feature work for like SI and stuff, and just watching him, how he interacted with like the whole day rather than just the game itself, was really like eye-opening. And I really enjoyed seeing like the different types of things that he could get with fans, and the architecture or the landscape of things to tell the story of the day without having to really shoot just the game.
I mean, there's so much more going on, with any sporting event than just the game. Like the game is great, right? The game is like the main attraction. That's what everyone's there to see. But, there's just so much more to tell, such a bigger, broader story to tell, whether it's about a team or a player. There's just so many more opportunities to create, outside of, the action on the field.
And do you have any like influences towards more of your feature / commercial work? Because one thing I did notice on your story the other day, where you mentioned a picture of Tim Tatter on his, I'm assuming his website or something like that. And the second I saw that, I was like, that makes so much sense, because like you two like stand out in my mind when it comes to like sports commercial work.
So Tim specifically, Tim is a mentor of mine who's, we've been really good friends, and he's been a mentor of mine for a long time. So Tim was one of the first photographers when I sort of got out of college and was started in, the photography industry. He sort of, and this was, in like the 2007 to 9 to 10 range, like he like totally just like blew up. And I was like, oh, this is what it means to be a commercial photographer, just like really high-end production stuff that was just different, and sort of like this hyper-realistic style. And yeah, he was one of the first photographers on my radar, and there were certainly others. But I actually was more into commercial photography when I started than like documentary sports photography. I didn't really follow sports photographers. I followed portrait photographers and commercial photographers, because that's just what was on my radar, and that's kind of the path that I thought I was going to take. But yeah, so I was following Tim's work. Little did I know that Tim is from Baltimore. Tim's dad used to be the team photographer for the Orioles and the Colts at some point. So Tim was a Ravens fan, and Tim was following my work. And he had like reached out to me after I had posted some images, and I was like, holy shit, who knows who I am. So yeah, so the Ravens went to the Super Bowl in the 2012 season, and he was like, hey, I'm going to be down there. I'm going to go to the game. Let's connect. So we hung out and got to meet, which was great. And yeah, that kind of started a bigger relationship where, I started, if he had a shoot in town, which was not frequent, but I assisted him once or twice early on. And then that kind of went to second shooting. And then as he got more into directing, sometimes I would be doing the primary art. So yeah, it's been a great relationship. We talk pretty frequently about just business, and he's a great person. And if I'm just, have no idea what to do about something, I reach out. Like I said, when I came up in photography, I didn't go assist immediately. So I kind of learned a lot of things the hard way, especially like business things as far as like contracts and all that stuff. So he's been such a great resource to me over the years. So yeah, so like guys like that, now, like Carlos Sorrell, Marcus Erickson, it's much more, I think, the guys in the commercial industry, and I try to bring that more to my documentary style sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I could list so many photographers. It's like my least favorite question, because I just like can't get everybody. So yeah, I try to get inspiration from different places. I try not to like overdo it with like, always looking at other people's work. Just because I think it's nowadays, like, it's so much more important to be your own photographer and have a unique vision.
Yeah.
You can't just be a good photographer. You can't even be a great photographer now. Like, you have to be unique. You have to be one of a kind to get work now. It's just so competitive. So I think it's good to sort of browse what other people are doing from time to time, but I think mostly is just trying to develop a unique vision, which is like, it's not possible. Like it's like you always try to stay ahead of the curve. Like I'm pretty hard on myself, so I beat myself up about not being original and trying to create something that's unique. And sometimes I end up like not attempting something because like, oh, it's not gonna like be anything good. So but I try to get inspiration from a lot of different places.
I see that you mentioned that you try to bring some of your commercial work into your live action or your feature type work, because I think some of those, like, the ones that really stand out to me are the close up, just kind of, it almost feels like a book cover. Like if that, that athlete had a book come out about their lives, a memoir or something, like I feel like those pictures line up with that type of work, because it really sells me on the athlete rather than kind of like, it's a sporting event or anything like that. It makes me really want to get to know the athlete more.
Yeah, and I try to mix it up, and I think there's definitely two I don't want to say completely different, but sort of completely different approaches to like different ways to photograph an event like a football game or sports, whatever. It's like, part of me like loves the sort of like traditional photojournalism, like everything's in focus, layers, like James Knockway or Alex Webb, and trying to make this really complex image. And I strive to do that lots of times, and then there's other times where that just doesn't work, and I just want to create like a Nike ad or an Under Armour ad, and just have it look more like that. So you kind of have to like turn that on and off. And sometimes you're just reading the situation, and sometimes, you know, certain things present themselves. You're like, okay, like this is going to be this moment, or I'm going to try to shoot it this way. So I try to mix it up. I really have passion for both styles of photography. You know, like people ask, like, you know, which do you prefer? And I look at my website. Like I like it all. You know, like I don't think I'm ever gonna just be, you know, a one trick pony. Like it, you know, it's not gonna satisfy all the sort of like the inner yearnings I have to do different stuff. So it's definitely a conscious decision to try to shoot in a variety of ways depending on, you know, the moment.
Mm-hmm. And what's some advice that you give for someone like myself, actually, that wants to transition from being someone who's in those, you know, live action moments, trying to capture feature work, to bring that into more of like a commercial setting?
That's a great question. You know, I don't know. I think, again, it's about developing your vision. Like your personal vision is really the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like after, like, you just need to shoot a lot, and over time, I think you develop what kind of styles you're attracted to more. But, you know, like, I can't just say like, oh, you know, just if you want to shoot photojournalistic, you know, shoot f8 and try to make these complex compositions. And if you want to shoot commercial, like shoot at f2 and a clean background. Like, I don't know, like it's not quite that easy. I just think like the most important thing is to like identify like what drives you and what like you really enjoy. And you know, like images that connect with you, like, you know, experiment and try to, you know, use a technique that you're seeing somewhere else, you know, in your world, and see what happens. You know, I think shooting a lot and experimenting and learning from your your shortfalls is important.
Do you feel like, how is it working with a brand and trying to work together on a vision? Because sometimes I've had this feeling sometimes where like, and I know I got to get over it a lot, is, you know, they're giving you so much input that you feel like you're kind of starting to lose like that part of you that you're wanting to shoot, you know, in this frame. So what's something that you could do to kind of like understand like this is like a team effort, this is a collaborative moment, that, you know, it's not all about you, but you need to kind of put yourself or your own spin on it to stay unique?
Yeah, I mean, that's incredibly important. You know, like you can survive as a sole entity, as a photojournalist, as a documentary photographer pretty easily. Like that's how that works. That's how, you know, it's just a solitary profession. But to be a successful commercial photographer, like, you know, you almost want to be the least important person in the room, because you know, the goal is to be doing work that has such a, you know, a powerful, broad vision that you just can't complete it on your own. And that's how all my commercial projects are. So, you know, you if you want to get into that world, like you have to learn that you need more successful people around you. Like you need to hire people in a team that that care as much or as more as you do, and that you would never be able to do on your own. And really, that's all those big productions get done. It's a, you know, there's a, when you're being paid to shoot, you know, commercial work, at the end of the day, you resign to whoever is paying you, right? Whether, you know, like, I think you learn a balance of like making sure you stay true to your vision, and like, you know, you can be firm in that, and you are typically hired because people trust you. Like you have ability and a vision. So when you come into a project, lots of times people want your input, and they will trust you if you say, hey, like, your idea is not going to work. Like, just trust me, you know? And sometimes you have to say, okay, well, we'll try it. And then when you know it's going to fail and then it fails, you can say, okay, well, I told you so, here's what we're going to do now. But, you know, it's a balance. Like, so, you know, you hold on to your vision as long as you can. And then when you need to bend, you know, you bend, and hopefully you don't bend too far where you break and you lose your vision and lose your identity. But, you know, that's the nature of paid work. Sometimes your vision stays intact, and that's the work that you see people share. And then sometimes your vision doesn't stay intact, and that's when you put the check in the bank and you don't share it, you know? So I think it's important to stay true to your vision as much as you can, but, you know, sometimes, you know, compromise is actually can create better, bigger opportunities than you holding on to your one idea. And it goes back to having a, you know, a team of people that are, you know, creative and that you trust, because I by no means think I'm the smartest or most creative person in the room. So, you know, I always tell even like my assistants or whoever, like, if you have an idea, like, you know, don't like blurt it out in front of the client, but like, hey, like I'm open for ideas, because like sometimes, you know, someone mentions something, whether it's a creative director or whoever, that, you know, may not be word for word like the best plan, but then it sparks something else. So you always have to be open to adapt and sort of like expand your creative vision, I think.
Do you, it's funny that you mentioned that about your assistants and how you collaborate with your assistants and their ideas. I've found that to be, what's the best approach? Like, let's say I'm an assistant and I'm reaching out to all these photographers. Like, what's the best approach to, you know, do you ask the photographer like, hey, do you like taking advice, or do you just kind of like feel it out and then over time be like, hey, do you mind if I say something?
Yeah, I think it's a totally fair question to have. Like, whether it probably, you know, when you're, you know, if you're emailing, or even if you, you know, if you get hired and you're on set, I think it's a fair question to have with the photographer. Say like, hey, you know, like I always try to look out for certain things. You know, are you receptive to me like pointing out if somebody's clothing is messed up, or if I see something, you know, like you definitely want to ask that, because, you know, when you're on set, you know, like I said, I'm open to sort of suggesting that, and that's something you pointed out, but you don't want that person like voicing it, like just blurting it out in front of the client, because, you know, a lot of photography, especially commercial photography, is about problem solving. So when you're on set, like, you know, you need to, even when things are out of control, like you need to maintain control, and like you need to have a temperament that puts your subject, you know, at ease, puts your client at ease. So, you know, having like a private conversation with your assistant or digital tech or whatever, and then you choosing to relay that to the client is sort of the way to go. But you don't typically want someone pointing out something, you know, themselves, just because it can kind of interrupt the flow on set.
Good point. Yeah.
And I think there are photographers, I mean, I know photographers and worked with photographers that, you know, not everyone's the same. Not everyone wants to hear that. Like, there are some photographers that maybe like, they're just like, you know, I know what we need to do, and you're just here to do what I tell you to do. And that's not really my approach, because like I said, that's the whole purpose of having a team is so you have more eyes on what you're doing than just your own.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that is because I've ran into that a couple times assisting. Like, you know, one person is totally open. Like, again, having that working relationship with Kevin, like over time, we definitely were able to communicate. Like, if I had an idea, let him know. But there's definitely been people that I've worked with in the past that are just kind of like, hey, like I really need your help with like setting up these lights and stuff like that. But if, you know, and I asked them up front before, like going into the shoot, was like, are you okay with me giving any kind of like feedback or like any ideas? And he's like, I don't, I just kind of want you to help me, you know, set up and everything, and just focus on that for me, and then everything will run smoothly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And there are certain times when it's appropriate, certain times when maybe it's not. And even like, I'll be forward enough to say, you know, I mean, I generally work with the same assistants pretty frequently. So like they kind of know how I work, and vice versa. But if I'm working with a new assistant, like rather than leave it to chance, it's my responsibility to say to that person, if I don't know how they work and they don't know how I work, to say like, listen, like feel free if you see something to like pull me aside and let me know, as long as it's not like disrupting like the moment. So I think you need to be forward with your crew about what your expectations are, because like anything else, you know, you don't want to leave things to chance. You want to make sure you have a good game plan ahead of time.
And for those like looking to assist, like what do you feel like are some good qualities of a good assistant?
Not starting an email with "I'm a huge Ravens fan."
Oh yeah, I see that.
And I'm not kidding, but not kidding. Yeah, you know, like, I think developing your people skills, being a good people person, is like number one, because having trust in people that you're going to bring into your world and onto a set, you know, with a client, trust is like the number one thing. Like, I hire a group of people that I know, like I know what this person is going to be like when they show up to set. Like I know that they know how to compose themselves and how to interact with people. And so I think being a really good people person and knowing how to interact with people is really good. I get a lot of emails and DMs from people that are really big sports fans that like want to get into photography. and I
They
don't.
just want to get into the stadium with you.
Yeah, yeah, and I sort of like don't respond well to that approach. If you're DMing me or emailing me, and like your first thing is like, hey, can I get a press pass, or like how can I get a credential, or like I just want to come and shoot and shadow you for a game. Like I don't know, like I feel like you need to have a bit more of like personal approach and talk about like why, how you found me, what connected you to my work, and what's your long-term goals, and like what inspires you about what I do that makes you want to do it. Something that's just like a little bit more personal. So that's the thing. Developing trust, being on time is incredibly important. It's like a death sentence for me if I have like a new crew person or assistant and they're late. It's just like you just can't rely on that. You have to be reliable. There's too much at stake with a lot of what we do that's assisting one-on-one. So yeah, like I just being personable when you reach out is a big thing. Also kind of knowing where your place is, regarding a career. Like I had someone reach out to me, was like, hey, I'm a huge sports fan. I'm 17 years old. Like, how do I shoot for the Ravens? And I'm like, well, back up there a little bit, because 17-year-old sports fan who's not really done any photography doesn't go from that to shooting for the Ravens. Like it's hard for me to respond to that, because it's just like you have to be more self-aware about yourself to know that there's just a lot of things that need to transpire between that point and that point. And I try to help out as much as I can. I try to respond to as many people as I can. But it's hard sometimes. Like having a good sense of sort of the way things are supposed to go and how they operate, goes a long way. I say that, but I didn't have a traditional route to professional photography. Like I didn't, go assist a photographer and learn that way. I didn't.
But you're still doing the work.
Yeah, like you gotta just do the work. Like what I try to tell photographers all the time is just be out shooting. Like you don't need to shoot for the Ravens right now. Like it's also kind of like that means you would like kind of take my job. The expectation is that the Ravens just hire like unlimited photographers. But it's me and it's like two other guys, and there's not just like always open positions. So like same thing with assisting. Like I have a core group of people, and there's occasionally scheduling conflicts, but for the most part, like I hire who I trust and who I know, and so yeah.
Going back to talking about the vision and working with a brand and collaborating together, are there times where you feel like, or do you seek brands to work with, or like has a brand ever come to you that doesn't really align with your like values or your vision, and you're just kind of like, no?
Sure. Yeah, like you get to a point where in your career, like you're early on, you're like, yes, let's do it all. Like, and that's important to figure out like what you like and what you don't like. So I encourage, photographers that are just starting out, like not to focus too much on one thing and really like, sow your photographic oats and see what, because like you don't know what you don't like until you try it, right? So I think that's important. And I think like I've had brands reach out to me and say like, hey, this is what we got going on. And sometimes it's a philosophical reason where it's like, this is not my thing. Like I've literally had like like a cigarette company reach out to me to do an ad, and I was just like, I don't want to promote that. So it's like, I'm not going to do it. And then there are other times where maybe it's like financially, like it's just not in line. But yeah, you have to learn how to say no, right? Like you get to a certain point where, I made a decision to enter photography and be a photographer because like it brought me joy. Like it was like what I'm truly passionate about. And yes, is that joy compromised occasionally? For sure. But you get to a certain point where like you just don't want to compromise that. Like unless it's a really lucrative job, maybe sometimes like you'll compromise. And I think that's a personal decision. Like whether you take on a project, you make that choice for a variety of reasons. So I think it's perfectly okay, and I encourage more people to say no to work that doesn't fulfill them, or doesn't offer respectable pay. You just have to learn how to do that, and sometimes it sucks, like because like you turn down a job and then you see the guy who did it, and you're like, oh, they're kind of getting praised for that, and like that seems nice, but like you just know in your heart, like you have to do what's right for you, and there's no like rule book or guidebook that tells you how to do that. But I think as you develop, um, as a mature adult, like you learn how to make those decisions easier.
And do you watch anything like, I know Tim actually had some sort of webinar series that was out not too long ago that I was like, I went back to check and it was like all gone. I was like, oh man, I was really looking forward to paying to like learn from him on that webinar, whatever it was. But do you know of any other good resources as far as like learning to kind of get going in that commercial space?
Yeah, I mean, like that. I think that platform is now called Pro. It was like RGG Edu, now it's Pro Edu. There are those things out there. Um, I encourage everyone to watch them all. Like you're gonna learn as you do that. Like you always expect like, well, I'm paying all this money for this, whether it's an in-person thing or whether it's something like that. You're like, all right, this is gonna be one that's gonna like change my career. I'm gonna be like a caterpillar crawling into a cocoon, and I'm gonna come out like a butterfly after seeing this. And you realize that there is no webinar, tutorial, in-person thing that is going to change you that drastically, because like at the end of the day, this is an artistic profession, and like some of it can be taught and some of it can't be taught. So you tend to pick up, and I've watched a bunch. I don't do a ton anymore, for the reason I'm explaining is that, like you may get like a useful tidbit here and there, and I think there's value to that, and whatever you want to pay or spend to do that, I think it's a personal decision. But it tends to be more of like a conglomeration of picking up little things here and there versus like one life-changing event. Because I've done a lot of them, and it's never happened. I've always kind of walked away like, well, I knew most of that, but here's a few things I can implement. And that's how it should be. Like you should be ingesting what you're seeing and not sort of like just spitting it back out verbatim. You should be like putting your own spin on it, and be like, oh, I can make this different. I can make this my own. I can make this better. So I think that's important. And I'm not going to list like all the different, platforms where you can get photography education, because it's 2020 and it's all over the internet. I mean, that's how I learned. Like I said, when I came out of college, I didn't have any knowledge of photography essentially. And it was all, even at that time, like just scouring the internet and trying to learn it and then go do it and then cycling back and forth. So that's still sort of the name of the game today.
Do you find yourself using other means to decompress outside of photography? Because I've talked with a couple people about this, how like so many people identify themselves as a photographer, but that's not who you are. It's just that's what you do. Are there any things outside of photography that you kind of like find solace in?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have hobbies. I like to snowboard, skateboard. I'm into running and fitness. Like that kind of stuff is great. I find that especially like exercise is when I get a lot of ideas and brainstorm. I have a running joke with my producer. Like when we're planning a shoot, like her texts start blowing up when like I'm like at the gym. That's like when my mind starts to relax, and like she's like, "Are you on the treadmill or something?" And I'm like, "Yeah." It's like she's like, "All right, stop." It's more like the night before I shoot or something like that. But yeah, like I think those kind of things, yeah, like kind of help me clear my mind. Like so much of my day is like processing so much information and popping from task to task and thinking about certain stuff. And you listen to a podcast, you got the TV on, or whatever. So just having those moments where it's more solitary for me. I mean, I love hanging out with my family, but as far as like from a kind of creative generation standpoint, those moments where I'm like alone by myself and kind of like, hear my thoughts pretty clearly is kind of when I really feel it, like I'm sort of like regenerating.
Yeah, part of the reason why I ask is because I feel like, someone like yourself who is working with so much pressure on, these high-end commercial shoots that, you could you can burn out, or something can kind of go wrong, and it kind of puts you in a weird mood. And I feel like it took me a little bit to kind of understand how to get outside of the world of photography to decompress. That's when I started putting my camera down more, and trying to do other things like run and like do intramural sports, things like that to kind of get myself away so that I could come back a little bit healthier. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and then everyone like like I think for me like too is like I thrive much more when like things are kind of like happening very fast and like it's like from one thing to the next. Like I'm just like I like being engaged and being. It's easy for me to stay focused that way. Whereas like the downtime, like you need it, but I don't like to have too much of it just because it's just not in my nature. Like I just like to be busy. It makes it harder to balance family time, but overall like it's easier for me to function that way.
and how do you find that balance with like at home family time and business?
You don't. You never do.
Yeah.
Never do. Yeah, you kind of just like tell everyone when things are, like going 100 miles a minute, you tell everybody that to just hold on and be like, all right, daddy's busy right now, but like I'm going to have some time. And, like they know, like my wife has been with me since day one as me being a photographer. So she's known what to expect. We had been dating for like 3 months when I went to go photograph my first Ravens cheerleader swimsuit calendar. So, she got thrust into like me 7 days being in some like tropical location like that, like right away. So she's been incredibly supportive and she allows me to do what I need to do to support the family. So yeah, you never find a balance. You always think you're going to like, you definitely over a course of a career, like start tweaking things that set yourself up to succeed rather than fail at that. Like I used to shoot weddings a lot, like from like 2009 to 2015, I shot a lot of weddings, more weddings than commercial work. I thought at some point, like, I would be into that. And I enjoyed it, I think, at a certain point. And then it just, I realized that was not my calling, not my passion. And my first son was born in 2016. So leading up to that, I was already shooting a lot of football on Sundays, sometimes more days than that. And then maybe shooting a wedding on a Saturday and a football game on a Sunday. And, I just knew that was not going to set me up to be the dad that I wanted to be or the husband that I wanted to be. So I made the decision, a year when we found out we were pregnant that I was not going to shoot weddings anymore. We were making a great living, but I didn't have any time to spend doing anything because, excuse me, it was literally like shoot the wedding, edit some wedding that was like, 3 weeks old, and every waking moment was editing on the computer. I tried to outsource that with not any success. So I made that decision. I quit cold turkey, and it was like the best decision I ever made because I had been half-assing my commercial business because I was just so busy with weddings. So it gave me more time to focus on what I really wanted to do and set myself up to have more time with my family. And it's just, I wish I had done it sooner, obviously, but, that it all helps with balance. But like when things are, when you're in it, you're in it. And then you try to make up for that when you're not. And it's a challenge for sure. Yeah. That's been, it's been one good thing about, this situation with COVID is that, I've got a lot more time to be here with the family. I mean, I work from home. My office is home. So just trying to step up more and help my wife out so that she's not going too crazy. And it's been something I've been trying to do and just be more present with the kids.
Yeah, that's that's one thing that I started to notice when, my wife and I, like right before we got married, and how sports, like I shot pretty much a full season of baseball last year, and that was crazy. Like
I think about that all the time, and I think like football is like I shoot practices and games, but like baseball is like just so many games.
Oh yeah, it took a toll on our relationship a little bit, but like over time we started to work together a little bit better on the schedule, and like I sacrifice things a little bit more outside of shooting to spend more time with her. So there's definitely like some things that you have to kind of like weigh and sacrifice in order to accomplish like a healthy relationship with your significant other, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's an evolving process. You always just try to get better at it. Just like with work, like you learn from your mistakes, and I've made a ton of them in both professional and personal life. So you just try not to make them too many times again.
Right. And so like, how is it shooting the Super Bowl? Like I kind of bringing that up because it's kind of just like a little bit of a different moment in sports.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It's awesome. It's intense. It's I've had a couple different. I've been fortunate enough to do it. A few times now. My first time was with the Ravens back 2013, and then I've done it six, maybe seven times the last consecutive years with the official NFL photo team. Um, the first time I did it, I had no idea what to expect. I mean, I never been to a Super Bowl. I wasn't at that point really well connected with like veteran photographers that I really, like, asked a lot of questions to, aside from a few. But that was a lot of like figuring it out as I go. Like I remember, I mean, we were down there for the whole week, and I remember like wandering over to the stadium one day, a couple days before, maybe it was the day before, and I noticed like people had like taped off like spots with their names, and I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. I guess I don't have a spot, so
Uh-oh.
I guess I should put a spot somewhere for myself. And at that time, it's like it was just me and one other photographer, so it's like nowadays, like when we shoot with the NFL, there's like 8 guys, so it's like you just stay in one spot. There's a couple people that move, but it's easier for you not to have to move too much because there's someone around that's gonna hopefully get it. Whereas like then it was like I was operating as a normal game day, so I was following the action all the way up and down the field. So you'd go up to one side of the field and a play was about to start, but there would be no spot on the sideline. So like you stand up, you freak out, and but yeah, there's so much build up to the Super Bowl, and it's like it's just nerve wracking, like how much build up there is. Like even like on by the time you get to the game day, like who's gonna sing the anthem and all this stuff. Like, but then like I remember like the first game, like it was all this build up pre-game, like so all this pressure, you want to do everything perfectly, this biggest stage ever, and then like the game starts, and you're like, this is just like a football game. Like this is just like what I do every week. Like it's sort of like you just over time, like you just know that like don't overthink it, and it was more pressure on myself when I was there with just like one other guy, like because it's a lot to capture for that many people. And now having experienced what it's like to work with a bigger team, you just like, especially a team of people that are great and that you trust, you're just like, I don't need to do too much. Like I'm just gonna do what I do. That's why they brought me here. I'm not gonna try to get a shot on the other side of the field. And you just learn not to take it personally. Like there's the moment's big, and then after the game stops, then it's like it's ramped up again. It's like that's like everything's building. I almost feel like like the post game is more important than the game nowadays. It's like getting the scrum of the quarterbacks and the winning quarterback, and like it's an immense amount of pressure on that, and it's difficult to get. So I'm very competitive. I always get ramped up, especially when that happens. The last couple of years, my post game assignment has been the winning quarterback. So like like I just determined like I'm going to get there. I have to be there and get the shot, and I just do everything I can to make sure that happens.
Do you feel like your rugby experience helps you in the scrum?
Yeah, not so much. I try to be a nice guy in there. Like I try to play by the rules, and I will say it's like being physically fit is like gives you an advantage, like to be able to run out there. Like I maybe sounds stupid, but
Yeah, no, I feel like that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't get there, then you're not going to get the shot. So like being able to get there and like hold your ground and know how that works, I think is important. So, yeah, there are other skills aside from photography that are useful in that situation.
That's funny. No, it's funny that it's good that you mentioned kind of staying physically fit. Going back again, talking about my experience last year shooting baseball. Like I'd say like almost halfway through, I reached like a point of like being so tired, and I was eating really bad. Like the only time I was really ever moving was when I was actually at the games. So do you find yourself kind of having to like, not only stay fit because you just like to exercise, but kind of help keep yourself up with, kind of like getting through the aging process and staying fit through that point in your career?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, like like I definitely like even if I wasn't a photographer, I think I'd be into fitness and doing that because I just enjoy it. But yeah, like especially now that I'm getting older, you feel the toll of like a career that means that you're like either running or like on your knees a lot, and that definitely adds up. And yeah, I definitely make sure that I'm taking care of my body like during peak season. Like like I don't drink before games. Like I want to make sure that like I'm like I'm as well conditioned as I can be, because that's how serious I take it. Like I want to be at my best because that, if that gives me an edge over someone else, then maybe I'll make a more memorable picture, like maybe I'll be in the right place. Obviously, like we all know that you can do whatever, you think is best. And then sometimes you get the shot and sometimes you don't. And there's so many other factors involved with that. But like, I like to control the things that I can control. So knowing that, I'm not going to like, rupture like a hamstring, I'm running down the sideline or whatever, like that's important. Like what I do is means I have to run back and forth certain places, and you realize like the days where you're not feeling good, you're like, oh, when is this game gonna be over? Like, and you already know, like at that point, like you have to like sort of like snap back into it, and that's like when your mind and your body sort of like playing games on you, and you don't want to be thinking about like your knees hurting when the game's going on. You want to be thinking about like what your task is. I think that's important.
Completely agree with that. So to kind of end it off, I always ask everybody this similar question. What's something that you've taken in your like creative career that you've kind of implemented into your like everyday life?
Cool. Well, I would say an easier answer to that is going to be to flip that around and say that one thing from my professional life that does not always rarely translate well to my personal life is being a perfectionist and also accounting for, what will go wrong. So basically, like as a photographer, or it transcends photography, but basically when I go into a shoot, you need to have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. Like you need to have all that in line, because if you go in with one plan and that doesn't work, which man, that happens so often, then you're shit out of luck, right? So so I'm always analyzing my professional career, like how can I make this the absolute best, and then like what if this goes wrong? Where's the plan that accounts for this? Like if that goes wrong, what are we gonna do? So that has sort of negatively manifested itself in my personal life, because like when we're planning a family vacation, my wife is like, she's the free spirit. She's like she strives on sort of being spur of the moment and sort of like the unplanned, and I don't necessarily call myself a planner, not in my personal life at all, but I'm more of like, okay, well, if we're gonna do that, like what if this happens? Like that's not gonna work, because like this could happen. So like, and I see how like, my wife reacts to that, and I don't want to sort of like pass that on to my kids. I don't want them to like be overly worried about stuff. So it's really hard for me to turn that off, and me and my wife have conversations about that all the time. It's like most of my life is programmed to account for all those different things, and I have to answer to someone if something doesn't go right, and I have to provide a solution that works, that gets it done. So I try to be more spur of the moment and kind of go with the flow, and not try to overthink or overproduce something like a family vacation or just day-to-day life with the family. So that's been a huge challenge for me, and I fail a lot, but it's something that I always think about and I try to be better at.
I love that you say that, because I kind of think about my career not being married to my wife. I feel like it's like a good balance. Like she keeps me kind of like if I wasn't married, I'd be kind of like this one track way, and I don't know how far I don't know if I'd be able to really kind of fall opposite to that. Do you feel like that's kind of happening there? So it's like, if she really helps you kind of stay balanced.
Yeah, I think so. It's like, and I think yeah, you could definitely, I think whether you're a person that is like 100% this way, 100% that way, it benefits each person to sort of like meet in the middle sometimes, or see what life is like on the other side. So there's definitely something to that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, having a spouse that is, I mean, we're not polar opposites, but we're pretty opposite there, I think is great, and sometimes that carries over into my professional life, that, like, maybe I won't be so uptight this time, but normally I'm pretty type A.
Well, dude, I appreciate you being on the podcast. I really was looking forward to interviewing you, because I feel like personally I just had so many questions that I wanted to talk to you about. But part of this reason about doing this podcast is because I feel like there's other people that could benefit from hearing from these questions and answers, that I just much rather help other people than just hear it by myself.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on, and I totally agree. And I think like, especially like, I think COVID has brought these little things out that maybe people were too busy to do before, and I think it's great. Like I try to catch them whenever I can. I just listen to Rob Trungali's podcast, and it's great. It's great to hear from other people in the industry, and it's really regardless of like what their status in the industry is, whether they're like world renowned or whether they're just up and coming. Like I think it's all useful information, and you can take away something from it. It's like what I was talking about with like photography tutorials, right? Like I think everything you can take something away from. Mm-hmm. It's great to hear from peers in the industry and hear what their experiences are. And I know that there's people that are going to listen to this, and whatever place they're in their career, like hopefully we'll take something away from it and use it to, do something in their career. So appreciate you having me on, and I'm happy to take time to do it.
Yeah. Thanks, dude. And I took away a lot personally. So that's good.
Awesome. Great. The more people we can help, the better, right?
Right. Exactly. All right. Thanks, dude. I appreciate it.
Likewise. Take care.
All right. Bye.